Well, now, as you'll hear on several occasions over the course of the semester, I'm a philosopher. What that means is I don't really know a whole lot of facts. And so I'm about to tell you a story where I wish I knew the facts, and I don't know the facts. If it was, if I could really do it right, I'd now open the door and bring in our guest physiologist, who would then provide the facts that what I'm about to go is blah, 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 blah. But we'd have the physiologist come in and pretend, and he'd actually tell us these things. I don't know them. I don't have that person, but take a look at what happens when a body dies. First question we want to discuss has to do with the possibility of my surviving my death. Is there life after death? Is there a possibility that I might still exist or survive after my death?
See, it's very clear. If you close your eyes and sit, right now you're looking at me. If you close your eyes, you cannot see me. But you are still there, isn't it? So right now, is it you who is looking at me? Or is it your eyes which are looking at me? So it's you who is looking at me.
Yeah.
Through the window of your eyes, you're looking at me. If you close the window,
Yeah.
do you still exist?
I still exist.
So, you are clearly saying you are much more than the body, isn't it?
Now, at first glance, and in fact I think at second glance it's going to turn out to be true, you might think that the answer to this question would depend on two basic issues. Do I survive my death? Do we survive our deaths? You think, first thing we'd have to get clear on is, well, what am I? What kind of a thing am I? Or generalizing, what kind of a thing is a person? What are we made of? What are our parts? It seems plausible to think that before we can answer the question, do I survive, we need to know how I'm built.
And you also know very clearly that this body you slowly accumulated.
Yes.
Or in other words, what you call as my body is just a bit of loan that you have taken from Mother Earth, just a piece of the planet. She's pretty generous.
No, it's very generous. Yeah.
She's pretty generous with the loan. But when the time comes, she wants to collect it atom by atom.
And so, the first thing we're going to spend a fair bit of time on is trying to get clear on what's a person, what are the fundamental building blocks of a person.
What we're calling as life physically is a mechanism on many different levels. There is hardware and there is software. You are core of hardware, bones. The software is equally important. Otherwise, how would a cell know that it's a human cell? That it is not a pig cell or a tree cell or something else? How does it know? Because there is an entire software, there is memory, evolutionary memory, genetic memory, karmic memory, there are varieties of memories imposed on every cell in the system so that it never gets confused. If you eat dog food for 3 days, you will not become a dog, isn't it? Because the memory is entrenched in this. So there is a whole software. The software package is actually bigger than the hardware, much bigger. And it is energized by what we are considering as a life force.
Second question that you might think we'd want to get clear on is, what's the idea or what's the concept of surviving? So we need to get it to ask, do I survive? We need to get clear on what am I, and what is it to survive? What is it for something that exists in the future to be me? Now, this question can be discussed philosophically in quite general terms. What's the nature of persistence of identity over time? But since we're especially interested in beings like us, people, this topic, this sort of sub-specialized version of the question of identity gets discussed under the rubric of the topic personal identity. What's the key or the nature or the basis of personal identity?
See, now I hold this pebble in my hand.
Yeah.
Initially I say, this is my pebble, I'm not willing to give it to you. After some time, I start thinking, this is me. Now when the time comes that anyway this pebble is going to be taken from me, I am being terrorized because I am being taken away. You are not being taken away. Only the food that you gathered, the piece of planet that you gathered in the form of this body, the planet is asking it back. If only you were aware this is only something I've accumulated, not intellectually. Every moment if you are constantly aware that I am not this body, this is just mine, all right. It's just a gathering. I've accumulated this, I'll use it, and when it's necessary, I'll drop it. If this awareness was there all the time in your life, death would be just change of clothes, isn't it?
If you understand that your disappearance as the form in which you think you are you, your disappearance as this particular organism, is simply seasonal, that you are just as much the dark space beyond death as you are the light interval called life. These are just two sides of you, because you is the total wave. See, you can't have half a wave. Nobody ever saw waves which just had crests, no troughs. So you can't have half a human being who is born but doesn't die. Half a thing. That would be only half a thing.
Well, to get clear on the answer, do I or might I or could I survive my death, we need to know what am I, what's a person, what's the metaphysical composition of people on the one hand, and we need to get clear on the nature of identity or persistence, or more specifically, personal identity. Now, as I say, I believe that when push comes to shove, we do need to get clear about both of those questions.
It's actually more simple than that. So what happens after? Okay, I paid back the loan. The question is only willingly or unwillingly, but whichever way, the loan gets taken. Your body, as you know it, physical body, has to go to the earth because it belongs to the earth. But there is a subtler body which is like a scaffolding. Only because the subtle body is there as a scaffolding, you can build this gross body. You eat a banana, it becomes body, you eat a piece of bread, it becomes body, you eat a brinjal, it becomes body, because there is a subtler scaffolding. This body that you see, the physical body, is only gathering around the subtler body. So when this body falls, the subtle body, which is generally referred to as etheric body or whatever else, is still on. It still has some information, but the important difference is, when you had a physical body and a conscious mind, you had a discriminatory capability. So once the body falls down along with your thinking mind, logical mind, and a discriminatory aspect of the mind is fallen, there is no more discrimination. You only happen by tendencies. So still there are certain tendencies. Why so much care in every culture, particularly in this culture, that at the moment of death, if a man is dying, no matter what your relationship with him, you try to utter the God's name or you try to create the right kind of atmosphere for him. Even if he's your enemy, you say Ram, Nam, Satya, whatever, you know, whatever simple things have been taught to the people, but something to create awareness and pleasantness around him because you want him to live well.
A skillful priest handling a person dying can do this for them. But he has to talk very, very, very straight. And he has to say, listen, these doctors, don't you pay any attention to them. They're trying to amuse you and deceive you. You're going to die. This isn't terrible. But it's just going to be the end of you as a system of memories. And so you've got a great chance right now, before it happens, to let go of everything. Because you know it's going to go, and it is going to help you. It's going to help you let go of everything. So if you have any possessions left, give them away. Give everything away. And if you have anything to say that is you felt that you ought to say before you die, and that you're kind of hanging on to and it's bothering you, say it. I mean, I don't mean necessarily a last confession, but say it said that Adlai Stevenson, shortly before he died, said that he had been making a monkey of himself because he didn't agree with the government's policy about something or other. You know, he had to get that off his chest because he had a little thought in the back of his mind that things were catching up with him, you see? So the moment comes when this thing called death has to be taken completely, not as some ghastly accident, something that all the friends are going to stay away because you're awful. I mean, sometimes people, when they die, are in a very unpleasant physical condition. They don't smell good, they don't look good, and so on. But an enormous amount can be done with scientific methods to make things reasonably tidy from a purely sensory point of view. But the main thing is the attitude, that death is as positive as birth.
See, many times fear arises in your life. Because of your discriminatory mind, you'll say, that's okay, but that it's not like this. You'll reason and try to get out of it. If there is no discriminatory mind, it just snowballs into paranoia. Paranoia not like as living human beings know. Paranoia which grows into a million, billion folds because there's complete absence of discriminatory mind. But suppose you create pleasantness at that moment of death, now this pleasantness also multiplies into a millionfold over because there is no discriminatory mind. Whether it's sweetness or bitterness, pleasantness or unpleasantness, all of this can take on a big proportion if only there is no discriminatory mind. So even when people are living, very little of their discriminatory mind they're using, mostly they're functioning by tendency, which is unfortunate. But once you have shed the body, there is no other way. You will only go by tendency. Unless you've reached a certain level of awareness where you can carry a certain dimension of awareness with you. Otherwise, whatever is your quality will snowball into something very big. If it snowballs into unpleasantness, we say he's in hell. If it snowballs into pleasantness, we say he's in heaven. So heaven and hell are not geographical places. It is a state that somebody gets into.
And then reincarnation.
You want to come back now?
If any one of us could at this moment be as one about to die, genuinely and honestly, we would understand the mystery of life. Because death is the source of life.
But before we can even get started, there's a question, really an objection to the whole enterprise. So we're about to spend a lot of time asking the philosophical question, is there life after death? Could there be life after death?
So if there is substantial amount of information still stored, which is the karma, the karmic substance is still strong, then once, suppose you left out of feebleness of energy, that is, you became old, energies became feeble and it rested for some time. So this kind of life energy just rests for some time without too much activity. But suppose the energies did not become feeble, but you broke the body by accident or suicide or somebody shot you in the head or somebody broke your heart, whichever way you broke the body and you left, energies were still intense. Now, this will take a long time for it to become feeble without the body and the mind. If you had a regular body and a discriminatory mind, let us say you would have worked out your karma in the next 10 years and made the energies feeble. But now that you don't have a body, these 10 years may telescope into 1,000 years. So this is the reason always they told you should never die of suicide, you never should be murdered, accidental death is bad, because now your limbo situation is long. very, very long, because you have no discriminatory mind, we don't know which way you will roll, and the chances of finding another womb are very little because you're in a certain level of intensity you cannot find. So unless you come to the right level of intensity, you are not suitable to take on a new body. So if you died of old age, energies became feeble, everything is fine with your body, you went to bed and you never woke up. Such a person may get back into another womb within 48 hours. But a person who died by breaking his body, either by accident or otherwise, this person may take we don't know how long, depending upon what level of intensity and how much of the information is still there, unworked out.
But there's a philosophical objection to the entire question, and the objection is fairly simple. It says the whole question is misconceived. It's based on a confusion. Once we see the confusion, we can see what the answer to our question is. Could I survive my death? The answer's got to be, this is what the objection says, the answer's got to be, obviously not.
We are going into areas which needs much more elaboration if it needs to be properly understood. Speaking just like this is not good. That's why we always joke about it and skip, we never talk about it, because it will lead to all kinds of imaginations, unhealthy imaginations.
All right, so here's the objection. So I'll give one version. The objection basically says, look, what does it mean to say that somebody's died? We're asking, is there life after death? What does it mean to say that somebody has died? Well, a natural definition of death might be something like the end of life. All right, so then if that's right, then to ask, is there life after death, is just asking, is there life after the end of life? And the answer to that ought to be pretty obvious. Well, obviously, the answer to that is no. After all, if we're saying, once you've run out of life, is there any more life? Well, duh. The answer to that's like asking, when I've eaten up all the food on my plate, is there any food left on my plate? Or, what happens in the movie after the movie ends? Right? These are stupid questions because once you understand what they're asking, the answer is just built in, it follows trivially. So, although it has seemed to people over the ages that the question, is there life after death, is one of the great mysteries, one of the great philosophical things to ponder, the objection says that's a kind of illusion. In fact, once you think about it, and not all that long, you can see the answer's got to be no. There couldn't possibly be life after death. There couldn't possibly be life after the end of life. Or suppose we ask the question in a slightly different way. Might I survive my death? Well, what does the word survive mean? Well, survive is something like, we say that somebody's a survivor if something's happened and they haven't died, they're still alive. When there's a car accident, you ask, so-and-so died, so-and-so survived, this person survived. To say that they survived is just saying that they're still alive. So, might I survive my death is like asking, might I still be alive after, well, what's death? Death is the end of life. So, might I still be alive after I've stopped living? Might I be one of the people who didn't die when I died? Well, gosh, the answer to that is, again, duh, no. You couldn't possibly survive your death, given the very This should remind us of, I don't know, at least it reminds me of this joke that you probably told. It seemed hysterical when you were 7, right? The plane crashes exactly on the border of Canada and the United States. Exactly on the border. And there's dead people everywhere. Where do they bury the survivors? And the answer is, well, you don't bury the survivors. So when you're 7, you think, I don't know, do they bury them in Canada? Do they bury them in America, right? The answer is, you don't bury the survivors, right? Because survivors are people that haven't yet died. So, can I survive my death is like asking, could I not have yet died after? And the answer is, No, of course, you have to have died if you've died, and you haven't survived if you've died. Right, so the question can't even get off the ground. That, at least, is how the objection goes. Now, I don't mean to be utterly dismissive of the objection. That's why I spent a couple of minutes trying to spell it out. But I think there's a way to respond to it. We just have to get clearer about what precisely the question is that we're trying to ask. And this is something that Rosenberg tries to get clearer on as well. So here's my attempt to make the question both a bit more precise and a question that's an open question, a question we can legitimately raise.